We have team coverage on this breaking news of the deputy who was shot and killed and the search for the suspect right now. We want to go to KIRO 7's Joanna Small, who has been at St. Joseph Medical Center in Tacoma. That's where the officer was taken, where he died in surgery. Joanna.
We were here when this procession left, and it was a very emotional time for everybody involved. There were family members, there were friends, and there were police officers and sheriff's deputies from all across western Washington that rushed here to get here. But the thing that Sheriff Paul Pastor has been reiterating, and we've been talking to you for a little while now, is that these guys and these women are going back to work. They're mourning the loss of a colleague. At the same time, they're out there looking for a suspect, and they're continuing to protect people in the community.
That's an important point, that what happened here will not deter us from doing what we do. And when you think about it, that's something pretty significant. A terrible thing, a terribly sad thing, a terribly hurtful thing happened here tonight with the loss of a deputy. But his colleagues, the men and women he works with, will be rolling up their sleeves and going out and doing the same thing, putting themselves at the same risk. What kind of people would do that? And I would submit to you, it's people who live an ethic of duty and obligation and sacrifice, even sacrificing their lives if necessary. This is a very sad event. You saw the cars with their lights on leaving to bestow some honor on Deputy McCartney. That was also very powerful. That was an affirmation of people not giving up, of people continuing to stand up. And I say, God bless people who are willing to do that. God bless people who are willing to have duty and obligation and sacrifice as the ethics they live by.
You know, we were here as his body was taken out of St. Joseph Medical Center. It was draped with an American flag. It's something that, from my perspective at least, is so hard to watch, but at the same time you want to watch because you want to show that respect. So I imagine there's kind of that emotional warfare going on.
It is hard to watch. It was harder to watch him brought in wounded. The staff here at St. Joseph's did wonderful work. They were faced with a very difficult task. They did everything they could to preserve his life. It was impossible. Someone took that life. As I said earlier, that needs to be something that we do not tolerate for a minute in this country. I know that there are times when police officers make mistakes or they don't do the right thing, but day after day, time after time, hour after hour, thousands of them are out there doing the right thing and putting themselves at risk as they do it.
Something that we need to remember this morning as they go back to work, as we've watched them go back to work. Now, you mentioned earlier that this is a relatively small department. It's a large county, though, and tight-knit from what I gather. So I assume that you get to know these deputies. They're very close with each other. So can you tell me just a little bit more about him?
Well, he is a young man, 34 years old. He's been with us for 3 years. He served in a law enforcement capacity on the peninsula for a while before that. His mother told me tonight that he loved doing this. This was where his heart was. He saw this as a calling, and he took it very seriously. And he did it right and did it seriously. And unfortunately, when that happens, there can be very tough consequences for everybody to people who are willing to serve.
You know, sadly, as we've seen with school shootings, especially here in western Washington, there's this community, this group nobody wants to be a part of. But people come from all over who've been there before. You know, you had Columbine, administrators came to Marysville, Pilchuck when that happened. Does the same thing happen here? Do sheriff's offices and other law enforcement agencies immediately reach out who've gone through that same thing to offer support, advice? I know that you guys have been there before as well.
We've been here before, and that will happen. I've already begun getting phone calls. The chief of Tacoma was here in person helping us out. What is happening when that happens is people pull together. But the problem is we see too much of that pulling together. I'm not criticizing that action. I'm criticizing the opportunity for it to happen. Again, last week, Douglas County, Colorado, 5 shot, 1 killed. There are too many attacks on law enforcement officers, too much disregard for the safety and the life of law enforcement officers. Unfortunately, we saw that here this evening.
You said you've been in law enforcement for decades, 20 years at your most recent stint here in Pierce County. Has this job become more dangerous?
I think it is a little more dangerous. As I said earlier, 2016 was a time when murders went up, when line of duty deaths went up. 2017 they went down slightly, but what has continued to go up is attacks on officers. We need not to tolerate that. That needs to be something that our whole community would say, time out, that's wrong, that's not what we do.
Your message to the community this morning, how can they help? How can they support the sheriff's office? Because you know you're going to have people showing up at your door.
And we appreciate that. We've got a big job to do in finding the second person involved here. We still have an investigation to conduct, which we will take very seriously. We will go about doing the rest of our jobs. There will be burglaries today and car thefts and assaults and rapes that we'll be investigating. So things don't stop behind something like this. I would invite good thoughts and prayers for family and for our agency. The other thing I would invite is when you see somebody with a badge on, remember what I said. They live an ethic of duty and obligation and sacrifice. They're out there for you, in your place, in your stead, and they risk everything for that.
Thank you, Sheriff. We really appreciate it, and we're sorry for your loss.
Thank you kindly.
Okay. So just to reiterate, we were speaking here with Sheriff Paul Pastor, Pierce County Sheriff. He talked a little bit about that fallen deputy, who he was, what his family wants people to know this morning, his name, that he has 3 young boys, who he's leaving behind. And one point that the sheriff really drove home that we'll reiterate now because it's worth repeating is that these deputies, after escorting the body of one of their own away from St. Joseph Medical Center here in Tacoma, are already back out there doing their jobs. These men and women are out there continuing to protect the community, whether it is related to the search for the second suspect or related to something entirely different. That is what they do every day, and they've been working through the night. They'll work through the day. We're working to learn more about that second suspect so that you can be on the lookout for that person as well, but you need to consider him, as the sheriff's department has said, armed and dangerous. Do not approach, but of course they need the community's eyes and ears on this situation.
All right, thank you, Joanna. They're reporting live from St. Joseph Medical Center in Tacoma. That's where the deputy was taken.